Hello, good afternoon. I hope everyone can hear me. Welcome to Galen Data Medical Device Innovation Webinar Series. My name is Elizabeth Hoff, and I'm going to be the moderator today. I am currently the Galen Data Chief Evangelist role, and I'm here with someone I've known for 20, maybe 30 plus years, John Groetelaars. So the topic of today is keys to a successful exit. Next slide, Monica. Next slide, Monica. Just a little bit of a commercial for Galen Data. We basically do a secure, compliant, and turnkey cloud connectivity platform. So for all of you who are attending, who are CEOs and leaders of companies who need to get data securely to a cloud platform, we are essentially turnkey, highly compliant, and we allow you to work on your product as opposed to your IT platform. And on the right, you'll see it's purpose-built for MedTech. We're compatible with all cloud structures. We have ISO 13485 certification, high trust certified, and most importantly for you, it's highly configurable. Next slide, Monica. So many of our leaders ask us, Elizabeth, why should we go with Galen versus building it on AWS? We are built on AWS, so that is a good thing. We can go to the geographies that AWS is located. However, this cartoon is directionally correct. On the left, AWS is definitely HIPAA compliant. On the right, the Galen platform offers you a whole host of things that are largely more secure, and we are HIPAA compliant as well. Next slide, Monica. So just a little bit of our features and benefits on the left, which I've gone through. A couple of things to take note of are the proactive health alerts. Many CEOs and CTOs ask us about health alerts. We can tailor those to clinicians, patients, families, pharmacies. And the bottom bullet point, we also do diagnostics, SAMD, you can do firmware updates over the cloud, so a whole host of features. So that's all I'm going to say about Galen, because really we're here to see John Groetelaars. John, welcome. His contact info is on the right-hand side. He is currently a partner at Arborteum Ventures, and that's John's contact info. Okay, John, I'm going to switch to your lengthy bio. So next slide, Monica, please. John, I'm going to have to read this because of your whole host of accomplishments, and then we'll get into how you and I know you, how I know you. So John is a 30-year veteran, global leadership, and currently venture partner at Arborteum Ventures. He was previously president and CEO of Hillrom, a public company, until its acquisition by Baxter in 2021 for an enterprise value of $12.4 billion. At the time of that transaction, the deal value representing an EBITDA multiple of 19.5x was the third highest of any MedTech transaction in the past 10 years and the largest all-cash deal ever in the sector. While at Hillrom, John had responsibility for 10,000 employees, $3 billion in revenue, and he transformed Hillrom into connected care strategy. So he's going to be talking about that today. So we're thrilled to have him on Galen Data because we're data. John values connected care. Prior to joining Hillrom, John served in leadership positions in Becton Dickinson, C.R. Bard, Boston Scientific, and Guidant Corporation, which is where I met John in the mid-1990s. John earned his bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Kettering University in Michigan and his MBA from Columbia University in New York. Of note is that through John's career, he's been part of 60 plus acquisitions under his leadership. So he brings an incredible and needed perspective to our conversation today, where the audience is mostly comprised of CEOs, CTOs of small and mid-sized companies, and they're from all over the world. John has global experience. And as I was thinking about who to invite for a webinar, John was really popping up first of mind because so many of the leaders I see in small and mid-tech companies really want to be acquired and need help about how to get to a strategic. So we'll kick it off to John. John, where do you find yourself today?
I am in sunny Sarasota.
Awesome, awesome, great, okay. Well, John, I hope you don't mind. I have a slide. I dug through the archives with a little bit of help from Jeanette Akoka, and I thought I'd start with a little bit of fun. Monica, if you could go to our last slide. This is John in circa 1995 with a collection of photos. On the left, John has always been a leader, even when I met him and worked with him in 1995. We were colleagues at a startup called MedTech based in the Bay Area. And that was part of the Guidant Corporation, which eventually got split up. I circled a few things because I think it's just of note in John's career. John and I were part of Origin, but the founder of Origin was Fred Mall, who many of you know is the founder of Intuitive Surgical. And there's John and Fred in that, and in the circle. And if you go below that, that's Al Chin, another one of the founders who really worked very closely with Dr. Fogarty in the early days and invented many of Dr. Fogarty's innovations. And then on the right, John and I having fun at a sales meeting. We didn't always dress in cap and t-shirts, but that was, I believe, in Spain. So just a whole bunch of fun back in the 1990s, John. And I thought we'd start, just with a little bit of fun and really a good time back in the 90s. And Guidant was full of young people trying to do our best and made a big difference to patients around the world.
Thank you for a trip down memory lane. Those are some great pictures you found.
Yeah, great.
Fantastic.
That's great. Well, John, let's get started. We had a lot of people sign up for this, and I really appreciate all of those of you attending from around the world. We had a lot of questions sent in, and I thought we would take this casually today, John. Just some questions. I know you know these things off the top of your head. So I think the big question is, you've overseen 60+ acquisitions in your career. Most of the people on the webinar today want to be acquired. And their investors are saying, hey, come on, what do you want? When's your exit going to be and how much? So under your leadership, you clearly met CEOs who stood out, who were exceptional in your experience. What stories or traits can you say about those individuals, or even the capability of the team? Like, what did you look for before you, as at a strategic, what did you look for in those people before you acquired?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And if I think about it, I think there's a few people that really jump out to me who are the archetype of that answer. The founder of Barty Diagnostics, Dr. Gus Barty, Trey Lauderdale, who is the founder and CEO of Volt. These are two companies that when I was at Hillrom, we acquired. They're just two examples of many who very entrepreneurial, very clear understanding of what the customer requirements are, what the customer needs are, both stated and unstated many times. And they just had a really compelling solution to a significant problem. In the case of Volt, it was around patient communications and more rapid care at the bedside, or even engagement with family members and patients and physician caregivers in the future. And in the case of Barty Diagnostics, it was really a superior high fidelity cardiac diagnostic wearable as a starting point, but then a bigger vision of how that integrates into a more connected care environment with primary care, and really showing up at the doctor's cardiologist's office with a report in hand, just like you do a blood test. You would have a full workup cardiology report from wearing a diagnostic device that you would actually show up on your first visit to the cardiologist versus your third visit. Therefore, you can get treated faster and more streamlined and bring a lot of efficiencies to healthcare. So in those two examples, just entrepreneurs, founders really knew the business, knew their people and their organization really well, and just had, if I could summarize it in one word, I would say conviction. They had a tremendous amount of conviction about what their journey was all about and what they were going to deliver for patients and for healthcare systems. And when that confidence comes across, it's kind of contagious. On the buying side of these transactions, you try not to get emotional and you try not to get too excited. But I can assure you, people on the other side of the transaction get excited and share that same thing.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but you talk about really knowing your customers. So in this case, would you advocate that the leadership of the startups really get to know the voice of the customer, the doctors, the patients, the hospitals? Are any of those more important?
Well, it depends on what the solution is. I mean, there's, I think if you're in a med tech, kind of conventional med tech business versus a digital solution, whatever your customer is, or in most cases, more than one customer, there's an economic customer, a clinical customer, a patient, knowing what those stakeholders are looking for and what problems they're encountering today, and having a clear problem statement, then providing a very clear solution, I think is the point I'm trying to make there around the voice of customer, because it is multifaceted. And then there's, of course, there's always the economic payer and the economic piece of the solution, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
In your experience, have you had startup CEOs or CTOs who went a little too deep in this is our technology as opposed to why it matters? Were you looking for why it matters and then just trusting initially that it would work?
Yeah, I think that's very important to communicate. I mean, a big part of what a CEO needs to do is be an effective communicator. So you have to elevate your communication to really think about, what is the message? What is the solution? How am I making healthcare better, or how am I solving this problem, which is extremely expensive or costly or slows down quality healthcare, whatever that solution set may be? I think it's imperative that the CEO has a very clear talk track and a very clear elevated solution or communication story. If you can't get your message across in a very short elevator pitch, or even better, down to 1 or 2 sentences, your chances of engagement with strategics and other stakeholders becomes more limited. So you've got to elevate your solution and your vision into ideally 1 sentence.
Yeah, interesting. So John, many of the CEOs and CTOs start in strategics. With my background, you know better, at the R&D organization. So in your experience, when they start at the R&D organization, they often start talking about technology. You just mentioned changing the vision and being eloquent about the value prop. What is your experience of how successful CEOs can move beyond the R&D to the business leaders? What tips? Yeah.
Well, again, put yourself in the shoes of the person you're speaking to. So let's say it's a larger strategic company, or maybe a very large strategic company. As you know, those are complex, big organizations with a lot of different decision makers. And having sat in the CEO seat a couple of times, a CEO is going to really take advice from people around the table with them. So an R&D leader is an important voice, especially when it comes to new technology and advocating for a potential solution. However, it can be two-sided as well. Like sometimes the R&D leader is going to have a not invented here syndrome, and might be telling their leader, this company has a great solution, but we can do it better. Give me a few months and some more money, and I'll get it done for you. And we don't need to acquire that company. So be aware of that, but also be aware that there's more than one voice that the CEO is going to listen to. Many times it's going to be a CFO. It'll be a business development or a corporate development person. It'll be a business unit leader. And I think your better relationship and advocate to really kind of navigate the corporate matrix that you're never going to figure out how to do from the outside in. People in the roles of business development or corporate development, or if you're a business unit leader, it's those people, it's their job to do that for you inside the company. And it's typically not the R&D leader. With very few exceptions, it's typically not the R&D leader who's going to be the #1 advocate for an emerging company and that company's voice inside of a larger strategic company. So you got to come at it in all different directions. Now, you're not going to get an audience with the CFO. It'd be really unusual for you to do that. You might get an audience with the CIO if you're a tech company or a digital company. But I think you really want to find the business unit leader or the corporate development / business development leader, and make sure they understand the value proposition you're working on and where you are in your progress and your journey. And that's a constant point of contact with you, along with other people like R&D.
Have you ever had experiences where a startup person really does work the org chart, like you said, where they're talking to R&D, but then there's someone in the organization that sort of blocks them from knowing others, and then they try to jump over and see BD or the business unit leader? And it is, I do empathize with startup CEOs who say, my R&D guy said not to go to anyone else, you know, or biz dev acts as the firewall to get to the business unit leader. How do they do that? Should they just go for it?
Yeah, it's a delicate balance, but I do think if you're given firm direction, especially if it comes from someone in corporate development or business development, look, run things through me. Well, let me take that back, because I'm thinking of different people who are in those roles. I mean, I would say, you know, people, you have to be diplomatic, but you got to be persistent, and don't be too worried about stepping on toes. But you have to realize that in a functioning organization and a high-performing organization, there's a lot of communication among the senior leadership team. And there's probably a process of reviewing what's in the pipeline of deals and potential acquisition targets, where those stakeholders that I mentioned before, CEO, CFO, head of R&D, head of business development, they probably get together on a pretty regular basis to talk about companies like yours. And they're going to, you know, calibrate on who's talking to who and what happened. So if you get a little too aggressive, it's going to come out and it might be seen as a slight negative. If you're really aggressive, it'll be seen as a potential derailer. But you have to go pretty far to really kind of knock yourself off the radar. So, you know, don't hold back. It's normal to have multiple conversations with multiple different people. If you are instructed, look, don't do this, then you really should listen to them and give that person, whoever that may be, that's being the gatekeeper, you know, do your best to work through that person. But a lot of times those gatekeepers, in my experience, can be ineffective at really seeing through the objectives that I had as the CEO, as an example, or a business unit leader in various organizations. And I always wanted to hear directly from those people. That was a little bit more my approach. And I'm sure you would find the same thing with other executives who want to hear it directly sometimes.
Yeah. So if we boiled it down to so let's say they're getting blocked by one of the gatekeepers. To boil it down to a sentence, and they're getting blocked, is a sentence something to the effect of, when is your regular review of pipeline opportunities and how can I get onto that? How would you phrase that?
Yeah, if you're getting stonewalled by a gatekeeper, you know, first of all, it might be a good reason. Maybe you're not ready, you know, and you need to take that feedback and listen to it and incorporate it. And then come back when, you know, maybe the question is, well, what do you need to see for me to get a yes from you that I'm ready to, you know, talk to other people in your organization about this opportunity?
Yeah, no, that's really.
You want to uncover what those, you know, what are those barriers? It's a very good discovery opportunity for you to uncover, well, what are the criteria that you're looking at, that you're measuring as important to you? Because every organization could be different. A conservative organization might be looking for something immediately accretive to the bottom line. A growth-oriented company is going to be looking at what can be accretive to my revenue line and help me grow faster. So you really got to uncover what is the criteria for business development right now at this company, and realize that it could change 6 months from now or 12 months from now.
And with the leaders of the small companies that we just discussed, how important is it for them to know what's currently in the bag of the organization? The reason I'm asking that is I do meet some CEOs, they say they're approaching let's just say, Acme Corporation, but they haven't really done the due diligence on Acme. What do the salespeople have? What's their structure? Can you talk about that a little bit?
I think it's imperative. You need to know what's top of mind for the customer, the strategic you're approaching. You need to know not just your value proposition, but how does it fit into the portfolio of the company you're talking to? And how could it help them solve a problem they have? It's not too hard to figure out what a big strategic company's challenges are, what their focus is, what their priorities are. Just go back and read a couple of quarters of their earnings calls, and they're telling it to you and all investors what they're focused on. You can easily get more granular detail from intermediaries like consultants and bankers and so on about what their real core issues are. So you need to know them. You need to know how your product fits their portfolio, their sales channel, their commercial footprint, what they can do to enable acceleration of the product or service that you're providing. So I think it's really critical. And what those two examples that I laid out earlier around Barty Diagnostics and Volt, both those entrepreneurs knew exactly how their product and portfolio offering would fit into Hillrom's existing offering and where I wanted to take the company. They wouldn't have naturally come to Hillrom as an acquiring company for both of those technologies, but they knew through their own process of discovery and our inquiry around what we were interested in that we were a good fit for them. So,
no, that's great. So, John, is there, with your work with Arborteum and where you are in life right now, is there a space that you're particularly interested in or you're watching right now?
I think the general answer is no. You got to keep your eyes open to the broad spectrum of things and see how technologies are evolving. I think for this audience that I think is made up largely on this call today, I think in the area of software and healthcare IT, obviously AI is the hot thing right now in every industry. AI will definitely have a place in healthcare. There's been some early wins, but the big wins are yet to come, I believe. That said, as we know, healthcare is hard. Healthcare is challenging and difficult. I think a company like Galen actually helps these companies who are working on a data-oriented software solution to really have a turnkey, trusted supplier for a cloud-based provider, someone who knows what the issues are for a medical device company and working in healthcare to provide all the cybersecurity and scalability needed for a cloud service, as an example. If it's not Galen, you need to find a trusted supplier that you can work with, and I think Galen's probably one of the best in this area. So that's an example where AI, I think, is we're all looking for where is AI going to play the strongest in healthcare. I have some personal beliefs that if you can, obviously drive better efficiency and better access to care and have a very clear return on investment for any kind of healthcare IT or AI oriented solution that integrates into existing workflows, I think you've got a really good chance of success in that category. And I think it might be in some areas that are not that sexy. It might be in the back office. How do you bring more efficiency to healthcare systems? As an example, right? And providing a lower amount of friction in healthcare. We call it a healthcare system, but I think that's a bit of an aspirational word, system. It's not a system. It's a bunch of fragmented pieces that don't really fit well together. So the more you can actually help enable it to be a system that's efficient, I think the better off we'll all be.
Yeah, John, back in the early days, we used to talk about it's good for the patient, but clearly you mentioned economics. When you talk about the value prop of a company, and you just brought it up, they have to be crystal clear on the economics to the quote system, correct?
Yeah, I can't stress that enough. I mean, there's, if you're talking to a decision maker in a healthcare system or a provider network, they want to see a really clear ROI that's with hard dollars, not time savings kind of
Yeah,
ROI.
yeah,
Because we all know that in healthcare, people they're not gonna lay off people to get that ROI. Those people are gonna find something else to do if you provide time savings. So it's got to go beyond time savings and deliver really hard dollars on the ROI piece. Then there's a lot of skeptical buyers out there of technology who really are savvy enough to look through it all and make sure they're looking for solutions that can deliver really hard numbers on ROI before they get to even play.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing would be true on the venture side. If you're looking for a venture investor, I mean, they're going to want to see, certainly at Arborteum, we'd want to see, a very strong, solid ROI story, a very strong economic value proposition. I mean, the benefit of tech is you can move fast, but the other side of that coin is you got to be able to show a really rapid ROI as well.
right. Yeah, I just want to emphasize not just time savings, because I'm sure you've seen dozens and dozens and dozens of pitches that are only time saving economics, correct?
Yeah, and those you kind of roll your eyes over with those, unless it's very substantial and you can turn that into a real hard dollar savings, or you can absolutely treat more patients because of it, or you can drive a higher revenue as a result of the time savings.
Excellent. So you brought up VCs. Elephant in the room, John. It's a tough funding environment. I ache for small companies out there for the last 1.5 years. How do you think 2024 is going to go?
This is just a personal opinion. I'm really not in a position to be an expert in this field, but from people I speak to, and the sense is that by mid-year in 24, things will begin to get more interest and more reception and more funding in the venture community. Which kind of makes sense if you think about where we are with interest rates and the trajectory that we're likely on. You're starting to see the IPO market starting to open up a little bit. So I think, I would just continue to monitor, a couple of those key macroeconomic factors, and then that will at some point begin to open up and turn on the venture funding spigot a little more. Venture funding is still available, but you got to have a very compelling, story and a very compelling value proposition to get that funding, and a great team that can go execute. So I don't think it's certainly, the deal flow and opportunities that Arborteum is looking at continue to be very robust. So I think the venture funding is out there, but it's probably a little more selective than it has been.
Right. And John, you brought up the concept of team. So we've talked about CEOs and conviction. I like that word. How important is their team and or their board when you're assessing it at the CEO level, or even if it takes it down a few notches from you? How important is that?
It probably really depends on the stage of the company. I mean, if you're very early stage and just out of your garage and you haven't even done Series A financing yet, the team is probably not that as important as one or two individuals and the actual, core product offering and how that could be integrated into a strategic portfolio. Then it's probably not as critical. As you mature and get into, say, C round financing or B round financing, or even later, I think the team and the board become more and more important. Because now you're maturing to the point where you're likely going to be a revenue producing company, and now durability of those results, becomes very important. How can you show sequential improvement in your at least in your revenue line, if not all the way up and down the P&L? And that ultimately revolves around having a great team. And as you know, in early stage companies, it's really the team that you're investing in early versus the product or even the IP, because a great team can help pivot and navigate to a winning solution and really drive value in the company. So if the acquiring company intends to absorb and integrate the talent, the team's important. Early stage is typically not as important, like beyond 1 or 2 people. Later stage, and I'll give you an example back to my earlier discussion. Later stage, it becomes very important. And I'll give you an example of this. So I talked earlier about both Hillrom and Barty, and I didn't realize this was going to tie together, but in both those cases, there were adjacency opportunities for Hillrom. And we and I really wanted to absorb and integrate the talent in both of those companies. Now, they were in the range of $15 to $25 million kind of revenue run rates at the time. And, I was looking to make sure we could keep that talent, integrate it into our larger company, and actually use them as the tip of the spear to help change bigger parts of the organization. From a technology point of view, from a culture point of view, from a pace of innovation perspective. And I was very cognizant not to allow a big company to suffocate that entrepreneurial spirit. Because part of what we were acquiring was, in fact, the people, the talent, their speed of operating, and their ability to open up the marketplace that we were interested in. So in those cases, again, those were companies that were kind of around their Series C investing, and they had a well-built team, and we really wanted to integrate them. And I can tell you that, certainly in the case of Volt, after 2, of the top 6 executives, we were able to retain all 5 of the 6. And after 2 years, they were still with us, and many of them got promoted and took on more responsibility to help change and transform the parent company. So again, it kind of depends on, the situation you might find yourself in, but don't be surprised, when you get to that stage that you're going to be looked at as, as a really, like, the people and the team are going to be looked at as a really important part of that asset, especially if you're helping to enable a new technology such as AI or connected care or something in the digital space that might be foreign to a traditional medical device company. So, that'll come through in the discussions and when you get to a negotiation of a potential transaction, but keep that in mind.
So I know a little bit about Barty, very little. I know one of the board members, or knew one of the board members, but I applaud you for the vision at Hillrom to put together a connected care strategy. And this may not be Barty, maybe it's others, but I would have thought that Barty potentially would go to another one of the more, another strategic that had more technology, but it's really interesting to me that Hillrom acquired them, and that was a platform on which Hillrom grew, and that's, again, to your credit. So I'm trying to think about the message to leaders. We have hundreds of people on the call who might be going just to the usual suspects, the usual strategics. Should they look beyond those to get to a company that doesn't have these type of assets and capabilities?
Yeah, I think this is where your board can help you, or advisors, investment bankers, consultants who their role is to help the ecosystem understand all these different moving parts and really put together for you a scan of, what the likely candidates would be to have a strong interest in your company, what that next level down might be. And then probably, having that discussion for you to explore, what are some of those other names that could be on the list that might be worth a call or an inbound inquiry to see if your solution fits their portfolio.
Oh, that's great.
Sometimes I think a lot of times it's going to be the entrepreneurs on this call who are going to see the connection before the big companies do.
Yeah, no,
that's why that kind of early on, that clear message and that clear kind of pitch about why you should be on their radar is a really important aspect, because you will get attention from those senior leaders, whether it's a business unit leader, a head of R&D, or a CEO, that, hey, yeah, you're right. I can see how you would fit into my strategy and help enable my strategy or accelerate it.
But they have to know your strategy to even have that conversation, correct? Which you've said as a leader, you've said in your annual reports and your quarterly earnings. Yeah,
it's that's out there.
John, in terms of the total assets, like tell us about your view on IP and quality systems, and even if they're a cloud have or a cloud have not, how much does that weigh in?
I think in the case of software, you need to have scalable solutions that are secure and resistant to infiltration. Of course, you need to have clear data. I mean, if you're running or hope to run AI, I mean, the quality of the data and how it's organized is a prerequisite, right? And how much of the data you can aggregate. So I think the scalability, it gets down to the scalability and ability to drive durable, repeatable results in your financial performance or other non-financial metrics. So yeah, that becomes very important in those categories. I don't know if there's any other elements of the question you were asking, Elizabeth.
Intellectual property, review of that, due diligence, anything that stands out?
Yeah, so think about due diligence this way. I mean, when a company starts doing, when a big strategic does due diligence on a small company, by the time you get to that phase, you've probably got buy-in from the business leader. You got buy-in that from business development and maybe whatever categories, whatever functions might be impacted, like R&D. You got buy-in to say we're going to spend time and money and resources investigating this company and doing diligence. That's not an easy thing to overcome. So once you get to the point of the company saying we're going to do diligence, obviously they're interested, right? And now they're looking for things to blow it out of the water. Like, what's a red flag that's going to have us stop progressing on our diligence? So the diligence in some ways is looking for the big issues. Many of them are manageable and are going to have mitigation steps to them, but some might be like a showstopper. IP is one of them.
IP is one of them, yeah.
IP is one of them. Illegal behavior and ethics and compliance with laws, that's another one. If that's discovered, you can bet everyone's going to run for the hills. If there's something in reimbursement, if it's a reimbursable product and reimbursement is very questionable or doesn't exist, probably not going to work. It kind of, maybe the framework I would give you is a framework I've used a lot. And that it's not the core of your question, but I think it might be helpful here, Elizabeth, which is, there are always 4 questions that went through my mind when looking at a company and getting into diligence. And the 4 questions we wanted to answer either before diligence or during diligence were the following. 1, does the product work? Pretty simple question, right? Does it work? Can you prove it works? Is there evidence to prove it? Right? So if it's a device, is there a clinical study or early animal data or something that proves it works? In software, it would be other examples you can use to prove the solution works, and how robust is the solution? Second, the third question is, can you get paid? Are people actually paying for your product? How are they paying for it? Is it reimbursed? Those kind of follow-on questions. And then the final question, which is not, you might think it's the same as the third question, but it's very different, is can I make money? So I can get paid and I can show revenue, but if I've got a 20% gross margin, pretty good chance I'm not going to make money. If I have a 40% gross margin, but the strategic I'm talking to has 70% margins, I don't think you're that interesting to them. So you got to have, I think fundamentally, diligence revolves around probably those 4 questions. What is your solution? Does it work? Can you prove it? Do I get paid for it? And ultimately, can I make money? You don't need to make money on day one. At least that was always my view. I know other executives feel differently about that. My view was always, if you don't make money today, will you make money inside of my company when I integrate you? And will you make money in the first year or the second year? When will you really start to contribute and be accretive to my bottom line? I wasn't always insistent on having earnings accretion in the first year. It was always a great thing to have, believe me. But as long as there was a trajectory to get there within the first 2 years or in the first 12 months, depending on the type of acquisition, I could get comfortable with it.
Would you trust a CEO who says they can make money for you day one, or how honest should they be?
I mean, everyone looks at your business, your financial projections, and knows they're optimistic. Whether you're going out for venture financing or whether you're selling your company to a strategic or positioning to sell your company to a strategic, they're not going to trust your financials anyway. They're going to build their own model, and that is the financial model they're going to use to value your company. And ultimately, if the acquisition does go through, that'll be the model that people who did the deal are going to get held accountable for in terms of execution once the deal closes. So yeah, so of course you want to be realistic, but we know you're going to also show a more optimistic scenario.
Is there ever a case where the internal model is shared with the startup CEO for input?
It shouldn't be. So
Yeah.
I would never share it, but yeah, you should probably, when you model it, as an entrepreneur, you should model, look, here's maybe a couple of scenarios. Here's where I would set the budget for my board. Here's the, an upside model to that, and maybe a downside. So you know how much funding you have available to you and how much runway you have available to you.
Now, I know you can't name names, but with some of your friends or in your experience, what were some CEOs or companies who just blew it?
Yeah, those were typically the ones that overpromised and underdelivered. They typically were the ones who you just had a sense that there was something, either a sense or confirmation that they had, some bad behavior, or they were really in the gray zone in terms of what they were doing and what they were proposing as the business model, or how they're going to get reimbursed. In other words, being too aggressive with their marketing or the claims they're trying to make with their product. I think those are the ones that stand out to me. And it's easy to detect. And when you get to the point of getting into diligence, it's super easy to detect and see. One of the first things that people are going to look at is revenue and recurring revenue and loyalty of your current customers. And if there's a lot of churn there, it's a red flag.
That's great. That's great. And do you feel like the CEOs can influence the acquisition price, or is that largely left up to the strategic and the bidding war?
As I mentioned a little bit earlier, I would tie that back and say, look, when the CEO has that kind of profile that I talked about earlier, I think they have a big influence, because it comes back to that conviction. Like, if they're persuasive and they can back it up with evidence and data and examples of how they're going to reach these financial projections, and it's believable and credible, yeah, you can bet it has an influence on the outcome, because they're going to persuade people they're talking to on the strategic side to have more aggressive financial models on their side. And if you can get them to do that, you're going to probably get a premium for your company.
That's great. So John, what other tips do you have for CEOs that I might not have brought up today, or teams?
I think you need to focus on when you get to the point of delivering results, financial results, revenue, profitability, or a path to profitability. I think you really want to focus on how one thing we didn't talk about is when you're an emerging company, and let's say you're 10 million in revenue, on a path to 30 million in revenue in let's say 2 years, right? The way a CEO is going to look at that is, okay, that's 10 million incremental year over year. I'm going from 10 to 30, over 2 years. So you're going to contribute 10 million of incremental growth to me. Is that important? So you need to do your homework on the other side and saying to this strategic, there's 10 million more incremental revenue. Is that meaningful enough? It probably needs to be a pretty small strategic, or a really small business unit that has somehow a lot of strategic importance to the bigger company. Because that's how a lot of people in the C-suite are going to think of it. Like everyone's driven towards incremental revenue growth. How do I get there, both organically and inorganically? And if you're part of that solution, you need to think about how do I drive, from a dollar point of view, incremental dollar value year over year that's meaningful to this company. And everyone talks about percentages, and I'm growing 30% a year. Yeah, but if you're growing 30% a year on 5 million, it doesn't matter.
That's right. That's right.
So it's got to be a meaningful dollar amount in growth year over year, and then that same thing about the path to profitability, or maybe you're at profitability or cash flow break even right now, and you can start to show that financial leverage starting to show up in the bottom line as well. So I think that's important to understand those financial metrics, because if you're talking to a large strategic, you need to be obviously a lot bigger to get their attention, right? Because of that kind of math of accretion to growth, accretion to bottom line becomes very important, especially if it's a publicly traded company and they're reporting their results every quarter. So just keep that in mind with who you're speaking to and what your financial profile does for their financial profile, and at what point you become of interest to them based on the scale of your business and who might be the most likely acquisition partners for you.
That's great. That's great. So, John, we're nearing the end of time. How can people work with Arborteum, or is there any specific areas that you're personally interested in? And I also want you to weave some personal things in. How's life treating you, and where are you spending your time?
Yeah, I think you gave the, for early stage companies, feel free to contact Arborteum. There's I think a general information email that we put out there. Feel free to contact people. There's a team of people there to help filter and assess ideas that are of interest to Arborteum. So they're open for business, as are other venture partners in the community. For me, I'm trying to preach or practice what I'm preaching today, which is I'm getting involved in selective board opportunities where I see a really interesting and impactful area for me to contribute with my experience and skills. I'm also looking for ways. Look, I've been blessed to have a wonderful career of 30+ years in this industry. And I'm looking for ways like this with you, Elizabeth, to contribute back and help this industry flourish and become continue to be a great place for all of us to enjoy a wonderful career. So, that's what's keeping me busy. I'm super happy about it. I got a couple of board activities. I'm working as a venture partner with Arborteum, and looking for ways where I can give back to individuals and companies to, help make healthcare better. And help improve outcomes for all of us as we all age. So.
Oh, John, that's great. Well, congratulations on your career. It's just so inspiring. I've appreciated being friends with you for decades and watching your leadership and yeah, it's been very meaningful. So I appreciate your time on here. I know you've got a hard stop to go, but thank you so much for offering solutions and some tactical but strategic insights for our audience today.
Right. Well, it's great to talk to you, Elizabeth. Thanks for the walk down memory lane and all the great questions you asked today. Hopefully, I provided some insights for anybody, some people on this call to help them advance their innovation. And as we all know, innovation is the lifeblood of this business. So, I'm cheering for you on the sideline. I'm cheering for you when you're pitching to me, and I just, want to see everyone succeed in this business and making our healthcare system better. So thanks for inviting me, and really enjoyed the time.
Thank you, John. We appreciate it. Take care. Okay. Bye-bye.